The late summer sun dipped low over the sprawling terrace of the Vanden corporate estate, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch like accusing fingers toward the man at the center of it all. Adrian Vanden, billionaire industrialist, media darling, and ruthless corporate tactician, stood with his back to the garden, his eyes fixed not on the roses or the sunset, but on the woman in front of him. Celeste, his wife of 6 years, stood straight despite the swell of her pregnant belly, her hands resting on the marble railing as though she needed its cool solidity to keep her from trembling. She had dressed with deliberate elegance, a pale silk dress that whispered with each movement, her dark hair swept into a knot that revealed the proud curve of her neck, but her face betrayed the hours of sleepless nights, the knowledge that tonight would not be a conversation but a confrontation. Between them, like a jagged blade, was another woman. Younger, a little too polished in her confidence, her smile carrying that self-satisfied edge that only comes from winning something she believes was a contest. Natalie Rourke, Adrian's mistress, known in the fashion world for her magazine covers and in the corporate world for being photographed on his arm at charity galas. She stood at Adrian's side, one manicured hand brushing against his sleeve as if to stake her claim before Celeste could speak. Celeste's voice, when it came, was steady, but each word was measured, weighted with a calm that was more dangerous than shouting. "You could have told me yourself," she said. "Instead, I heard it from a reporter. One of your own shareholders tipped them off. Do you know how humiliating it is to be congratulated for my pregnancy in the morning and offered sympathy for my marriage in the afternoon?" Adrian gave a dismissive shrug, the kind he reserved for boardroom disputes he deemed beneath him. "The press thrives on speculation. You shouldn't take it personally." He turned slightly toward Natalie, his gaze warm in a way it hadn't been toward Celeste in months. "Some people can handle the attention." Celeste's jaw tightened. She had been silent through years of subtle betrayals, late nights explained away as business, text messages that disappeared, the change in his tone when he spoke to her in public versus private. But this, bringing his mistress into their home while she carried his child, was not just a humiliation. It was an escalation. She stepped closer, her voice low enough that Natalie would have to strain to hear. "I have stood beside you when the markets turned against you, when your partners tried to take you down, when your own brother sued you for control of the company. Do not mistake my loyalty for weakness." Adrian's eyes narrowed. "You're emotional. You should rest." The words were as sharp as a shove. Celeste took a breath, steadying herself. "Don't patronize me." Natalie's voice cut in, bright and poisonous. "Maybe it's time to accept things as they are, Celeste. Adrian deserves to be happy. And you, well, you'll have the baby." The sentence hung in the air like smoke from a fire that hadn't yet been put out. Celeste turned her gaze on the younger woman, her expression unreadable. She could have lashed out then, could have reminded Natalie that beauty and youth were commodities Adrian traded as easily as stocks, but instead she smiled, a slow, knowing curve of her lips that made Natalie's confidence falter for just a heartbeat. Adrian moved forward, as if to end the conversation, but the motion was too abrupt, too forceful. His hand brushed Celeste's arm, and whether it was a push meant to guide her away or something more deliberate, her heel caught on the edge of the terrace step. She stumbled, not far, but enough that Natalie, startled, stepped neatly into the space between them. For an instant, it looked as if he had pushed his wife toward his mistress. The air seemed to thicken. A servant paused at the far end of the terrace, eyes flicking toward the trio before quickly looking away. Somewhere beyond the garden, a camera shutter clicked, whether imagined or real, Celeste could not tell. She straightened without a word. But in that moment, a decision crystallized, as clean and sharp as glass snapping in her mind. She would not scream. She would not plead. She would not throw accusations like weapons across the space between them. She would do what Adrian had never believed her capable of. She would fight him on the only battlefield that mattered to him, the empire he thought he owned. For years, Adrian had underestimated her, believing she was content with charity luncheons and society photographs. But Celeste had paid attention, to contracts signed late at night, to patterns in shareholder meetings, to the quiet ways in which influence was traded like currency. She knew where the cracks were. And she knew how to widen them. Adrian, seeing her silent composure, mistook it for defeat. He turned his back to her, guiding Natalie toward the glass doors that led into the main hall. "We're done here," he said over his shoulder. "Go inside before you wear yourself out." Celeste stayed where she was, the scent of the roses and the faint perfume of Natalie's passage mingling in the cooling air. Her hands rested again on the marble railing, but this time, she felt no need for its support. The child she carried shifted within her, and she let her palm rest over the curve of her belly. There would be no public scene tonight. There would be no hint, to Adrian or Natalie, of the storm she was about to unleash. Somewhere inside the house, the party music swelled, masking the footsteps of those coming and going. She could already picture the next week. The carefully timed phone calls, the discreet meetings with the few allies she could trust, the slow gathering of information that Adrian believed was buried beyond her reach. He had always assumed she wasn't interested in the company's inner workings. But she had read every quarterly report, memorized every shift in the board's composition, noted every rumor about internal disputes. She knew which shareholders had been dissatisfied for years, which ones whispered about Adrian's reckless spending, and which ones might be tempted by an opportunity for greater influence. Celeste's gaze followed the last streak of light as it slipped behind the horizon. Revenge, she knew, was not a matter of shouting in the dark. It was a matter of letting the dark become so complete that when you struck the match, the flame was blinding. When she finally turned to go inside, her expression was calm, almost serene. She passed guests who greeted her politely, none of them suspecting that behind her polite nods was the outline of a plan that would, in time, reach the newspapers with a headline even more shocking than the one about her marriage. And when Adrian's empire began to crack, when the world learned that his own wife had been the one to set the fall in motion, he would finally understand the cost of mistaking grace for surrender. Would you like me to continue with part 2, where her revenge begins to unfold through the corporate world? Elena stared at the flickering screen of her laptop, her hands trembling as she scrolled through the encrypted files she'd managed to copy from Victor's private server. The push, literal and brutal, had happened just weeks ago at their opulent estate in the Hamptons. Victor, fueled by rage during one of their explosive arguments, had shoved her toward the grand staircase while his mistress, the sleek and ambitious Lila Voss, watched from the shadows with a smug curl on her lips. Elena, 7 months pregnant, had stumbled but caught herself on the railing, the baby kicking furiously inside her as if protesting the chaos. That moment crystallized everything. The years of emotional warfare, the infidelity paraded like a trophy, the way Victor treated their marriage as a mere business merger. But Elena wasn't the fragile trophy wife Victor assumed. Before marrying him, she'd been a sharp financial analyst, burying her career under his shadow to play the perfect spouse. Now, with bruises fading on her arms and a fire in her belly that matched the life growing there, she plotted her revenge. The war Victor had declared in their prenup battles and boardroom manipulations was about to turn nuclear. Her discovery. Hidden folders detailing Victor's insider trading schemes, offshore accounts siphoning billions from Lang Industries, and falsified reports that propped up the company's stock prices. Exposing the shares meant unraveling his empire, but she needed to do it surgically, ensuring she and the baby emerged unscathed. In the dim light of her secret apartment in Manhattan, a bolt hole she'd rented under a false name, Elena pieced together the puzzle. The push wasn't just an act of violence, it was the culmination of Victor's paranoia. He'd learned she was digging into his affairs after a leaked email from his lawyer hinted at divorce proceedings. Lila, the mistress, wasn't just a fling. She was Victor's VP of operations, complicit in the fraud, her signatures on documents that hid toxic assets. Elena's revenge began with an anonymous tip to the SEC, but that was too blunt. No, she wanted Victor to feel the slow bleed, the way she'd felt every betrayal. She started small. Using a burner phone, she contacted a journalist at the Wall Street Journal, feeding snippets of evidence, a redacted memo showing Victor authorizing stock dumps before a market crash. The article hit the next morning, subtle but damning, titled, Whispers of Irregularities at Lang Industries. Shares dipped 5% by noon. Victor called her furiously, his voice a venomous hiss over the line. What the hell have you done, Elena? This is your life too, our child's future. Our child. She retorted, her voice steady despite the adrenaline. The one you nearly killed when you shoved me like a ragdoll in front of your whore. She hung up, heart pounding. But that was just the appetizer. Part 2 of her plan involved allies. Elena reached out to Marcus Hale, Victor's former CFO, fired years ago for questioning shady deals. Marcus, bitter and broke, was eager to help. Over coffee in a nondescript diner, he provided the missing links, passwords to Victor's cloud storage, names of board members in on the scam. As the days blurred, Elena's pregnancy advanced, her belly a constant reminder of stakes higher than revenge. Doctors' visits under alias, ultrasounds showing a healthy boy, her son, who deserved better than a father like Victor. She worked tirelessly, compiling a dossier. One night, as rain lashed the windows, she hacked into Lila's email thanks to Marcus's intel. There it was. Correspondence proving Lila had forged Elena's signature on share transfers, diluting her stake in the company to fund Victor's lavish gifts to his lover. The exposure escalated. Elena leaked audio recordings, Victor boasting about manipulating earnings calls, to a whistleblower site. Social media erupted. Hashtag Lang fraud trended, with memes depicting Victor as a cartoon villain pushing a pregnant woman off a cliff. Investors panicked. Shares plummeted another 15%. Victor's PR team spun it as baseless rumors, but the damage was done. He showed up at her apartment uninvited, pounding on the door like a madman. Elena, open up. We can fix this. Lila means nothing, it's always been you. She didn't open the door. Instead, she watched through the peephole as security dragged him away, his face twisted in desperation. But Victor wasn't one to go quietly. He countersued for defamation, claiming Elena's hormonal instability due to pregnancy made her unreliable. His lawyers painted her as a gold digger, leaking stories to tabloids about her erratic behavior. Lila, ever the opportunist, went public with tearful interviews. I was seduced by his power, but Elena's the real victimizer here. Elena anticipated this. Her next move, a press conference. Dressed in a simple black maternity dress that accentuated her vulnerability and strength, she stood before cameras in a neutral hotel ballroom. No lawyers, just her truth. My husband pushed me, physically assaulted me, while I carried our child, all because I discovered his crimes. She presented redacted documents, enough to tease without full disclosure. Lang Industries is built on lies. The shares you hold, inflated by fraud. I've filed with the authorities. The room exploded with questions. Shares tanked 30% in real-time trading halts. Victor's board called an emergency meeting, ousting him as CEO to salvage what they could. But Elena wasn't done. In the shadows, she coordinated with federal agents, turning over the full dossier in exchange for immunity and protection. Raids hit Lang headquarters at dawn, agents carting away servers while Victor watched from his penthouse, handcuffed. As the scandal unfolded, Elena gave birth alone in a private clinic, the pain of labor eclipsing the war's toll. Holding her son, named Alexander, after her late father, she whispered promises of a better life. Victor's trial loomed, but he tried one last gambit, a plea deal implicating Lila as the mastermind. Lila, cornered, flipped on him, revealing even deeper corruption, bribes to regulators, embezzlement funding political campaigns. Elena's revenge peaked when the courts froze Victor's assets, awarding her controlling shares in the divorce settlement. She restructured Lang Industries, firing the corrupt, pivoting to ethical tech. Shares rebounded under her leadership, investors hailing her as a savior. Victor, bankrupt and disgraced, ended up in a minimum security prison. His mistress long fled to Europe. But revenge has echoes. Months later, as Elena rocked Alexander to sleep in their new home, a modest brownstone far from the Hamptons, XS, she received an anonymous letter. You think it's over. Watch your back. Was it Victor's doing from behind bars? Lila's parting shot? Or a disgruntled shareholder? The war, it seemed, had birthed new battles. Elena smiled faintly, tucking the letter away. She'd built an empire from ashes once, she could do it again. Her son cooed, oblivious to the storms. For now, peace reigned, but vigilance was her new armor. The exposure of shares had exposed souls too, Victor's greed, Lila's ambition, her own resilience. In the quiet night, Elena plotted not revenge, but safeguards, ensuring her child's future shone brighter than any billionaire's tarnished gold. Word count 1024.